Hey guys, NJ here, and we are looking at the QX90. This was sent over to me from Banggood, so a big thank you to them. I already put up a video on the of some flight footage, so I thought I'd whet your appetite and show you that first. Obviously, as we're heading into the winter months now, certainly here in the UK, things are getting colder and more horrible. The weather is getting more volatile, and it's time to look at other ways to get our FPV fix. So that is really the sole reason why I was interested in the micros. I mean, I've had a Hubsan X4 for the longest time. I'm sure a lot of you guys have had the same thing. Great little indoor trainer, great fun, and I still, recommend that to a lot of people when they're first starting out, just as something to try. I guess we have to mention it. We have to mention the Mini Whoop because the Inductrix that was made FPV by the community and turned into well, it became a real craze. It was proof that the indoor thing could happen. It could be these micros could handle well, and that's what's really kind of spawned the growth of these micros on a whole nother level. And I guess this is certainly a result of that craze taking off. I was pretty skeptical, to be honest with you, with what the performance was going to be like on one of these, but this one in particular took my interest for a few reasons, one of which is the fact that this one actually runs an F3 flight controller, and one that will actually run at 8 kilohertz. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of you that are out there thinking, well, 8 kilohertz is a little bit overkill for something that's running brush motors, and I would tend to agree. But the point is, it's great to see that the miniaturization of all this tech is reaching down to these little micros and sub-micros, and there is definitely a noticeable performance increase for having that stuff available. So when it comes to the QX, I'll put the links in the product description for everything, so you can see where I got this one, and also some of the modifications that I went through to get this to work. It does come in this box here, pretty reasonable packaging. I've heard mixed reports about people receiving theirs with the antennas bent and all kinds of stuff, and I noticed when I got mine, this whole top assembly, which is just put on with rubber bands, was actually disconnected. I mean, the rubber bands weren't on there, it was connected physically via the wire, but it was loose, and I think that was probably a result of some feedback of, with it assembled like this in this packaging, it was getting damaged in transit. So it's good to see that wasn't a problem when it turned up for mine. In terms of the micro cam VTX on top, you've probably all seen these. They're fairly standard now. The 25 milliwatt. I think this is 32 channel. It may be 40. I'll have to check. I'm just using it straight on the default Fat Shark 1. It's got dip switches on the back. You can get ones down at this level which have the LEDs, but obviously they're trying to keep the cost down. And the cost is really quite remarkable for what we're getting here. So like I said, 25 milliwatts. We got a 4-prong cloveleaf on here, and the video quality has been decent. I'm not sure exactly what the field of view is, but you can see from the flight video I put up, it's pretty wide on this lens. Again, the other kind of mixed thing I've heard was some people have received these, and this goes for the QX80 as well, which is the fractionally smaller model that uses this same combo FPV system on top, was that some of the lenses were arriving and actually slightly out of focus. Now the problem is they really glue these in, although you can actually see a thread on here on this lens. You have got absolutely no chance, really. I haven't heard of anyone yet who's managed to actually, even heat that up and try and get that lens loose to refocus it. It's really properly glued in there. So if that is the case, unfortunately, it's a case of RMAing it or speaking to Banggood and see what they'll do about it. But I've since I put up my flight video, I've spoken to probably 10 to 15 people that have all got these now, and I haven't had. No one that I've spoken to of that group have had any problems with the focus or the camera. One of the group did have a problem, my friend Bruno, with his the actual board having a problem, and it was just it wasn't tuning in properly. But other than that, I think on the whole everyone's been receiving decent models, certainly as of late. So what did I do to this one to get it to fly the way it did in that video, as some people have all been, well, lots of people have been asking. So the first thing I did, I tried out the stock props. Now, the props that came with it were these kind of, I guess they are kind of the Hubsan X4 clones, because they look almost identical to my eyes. And these they're not been machined very well, they're moulded very well. They vibrated quite a lot. I saw a fair bit of jello in the video, and second flight in, one of them just popped straight off of the shaft. There wasn't a very tight fit. So I think that is the first thing you're going to have to look at. If you're going to order one of these, the stock props are pretty rubbish. I did experiment with different prop types. Now there's a model called the Rolling Spider. So I got the Rolling Spider props, which are actually, I think they're 65 mil, so they're slightly too long. Now when you put these on, the problem is they're actually going to meet in the middle and collide. So what I did was to take these ones, because the other thing I wanted a little more throttle response. I felt like, my suspicion was it felt like it just wasn't performing very well, and I felt like it could give a little more throttle response, and there was more power there because the flight times were so good. I was sitting there thinking, well, I can surely sacrifice some of this for a bit more power. So I was looking for a slightly better blade than those original Hubsan stock props. So I got these Rolling Spider props, again, link in the description to those. Now I've seen mixed solutions for using these. I've seen some people use them at their standard size, and to actually get these motors, because they're in these kind of rubber grommets here which do a good job of holding them, and actually kind of teasing these motors out to kind of a V, which I can kind of do there on camera, like that, so that they're kind of up and outwards, at which point you could get these 65mm props to miss each other just. The only problem I found while that worked for the briefest of time was that as they vibrated, they just vibrated straight again, and then you could hear the tips colliding, and it was a problem again. So what I did was actually to cut these down, making them kind of into like mini bullnose props. And you can see against the stand, let me get a black Hubsan prop here, you can see against this one there's just a load more surface area, and there's more surface area now. They're a bit more bullnose. They offered the extra thrust that I wanted, and these, to me, like this in this state, were the best flying prop I found, and these are the props that you see in the video. Unfortunately, as I was cutting these down myself, as precise as you want to be, cutting them down is it's a tricky thing to do, and I just, did the most accurate measurement I could to cut these down. They still weren't perfect. They still vibrated, which caused jello, and you can see the jello in my video. So they flew the best, but they're difficult to do. I mean, I was being a little bit lazy. One thing you could do if you've got a rotary tool like a Dremel or similar is to make yourself a little jig out of some plastic. If you make like a sort of egg-shaped piece of plastic, you could cut out a section to go around the base of your rotary tool, and then cut out a hole that's the same diameter as one of the motors, and then you can put the prop on the motor and rotate it round to exactly the point where you want this to cut off the prop, and then as you spin the prop it will perfectly cut as you rotate it. So that's another option if you want to get really into it. For me, I just thought, let me see what else is out there. Now, the best of both worlds has been these Walkera Ladybird props, and you can just tell from the packaging, and this Walkera, these are really nice quality. They're kind of, and that's what I've got on here at the minute. Again, I'll put links to these in the description. These are very nicely moulded. They don't come off even after a couple of crashes. They're holding on nice and strong. They've got kind of a bit of a bull nose to them, and the surface area of the prop's really good. These have been fantastic. So I haven't got any jello in the video anymore, or very, very minimal, and I think the performance is definitely there. And I'm still, on top of that, getting flight times of around about, I guess if I take it easy around the house, it's probably about 5 minute 20. And then if I'm throwing it around outside and doing some acro, like I was in the video that I posted before, then you're really down to sort of 4.5 minutes. Still 4.5 to 5 minutes is still really respectable, and you know, I'm super pleased with that. The battery you get 2 of these in the pack, and they are 600 milliamp 25C batteries, and they've been absolutely fine, no problem at all. One of the extra spares that I did buy along with the props was a value pack from Banggood, which had 4 of these, exactly the same spec, 600 milliamp 25C 1-cell batteries, and it also came with, I think it was about £8. It was really cheap, delivered, 4 batteries, and then this 4-point charger with a USB power cord. Again, link in the description for that. Very pleased with that. So yeah, you know, 4 of those plus the 2 that came with it, you've got absolutely tons of flying time there. You do get a balance charge cable. Well, it's a charge cable to that will plug in and make this into a 2S pack along with the other pack, and then you can plug that into your charger, but only the kind of charger you can plug it into is one that charges straight off the balance lead. What I actually did, and I'll just put a photo insert to show you what I did. I took that balance lead and I just took away a little bit of the insulation on the positive and the negative wire and made those contact points to go at the main ports of main plus and minus of my standard charger, and that allowed me to trick the charger into thinking the main port wires were connected, and then it did a balance charge on my standard 206BI charger, which is more like the kind of charger you guys have probably got if you haven't got a charger that goes straight into, that charges straight off a balance port. So there's a little workaround there for that. It does come with clean flight on there, and this model comes with a Taranis. I think there's a Taranis and a FlySky option as well for the receiver, which is great. I've got Taranis, so I got the Taranis module, Taranis receiver here. You can see there's a little bind button on the back. It comes with EU LBT software. Please be aware of that. That's kind of important. What else can I tell you? I took off the 4 stands here. These are the 4 standoffs that were screwed here to kind of protect the battery. I didn't really find those a necessity at all. This thing is so light. There's not as if it's going to be coming down with any real inertia where you're going to be damaging the battery, so I'd say save yourself a few grams and get rid of those. There's no need for them, and I've just used the standard rubber band across the bottom to retain the battery, which works absolutely fine. They do include some massive thick bits of Velcro, which is just stupid and heavy on something this small. Total waste of time, so don't bother with that. Just a rubber band on the bottom, and then I used just a tiny bit of sticky pad, not sticky pad, sorry, it's like a silicone grip pad, just to stop that battery sliding around. And then I've also opted just to add another rubber band on top here, just to hold this camera and VTX. I like using the rubber band as opposed to sticking this down, because in a harder crash, or if it lands upside down, this just tends to kind of flex backwards, and flexing backwards is a far better solution than having it stay hard and then damage this antenna. Obviously this is quite an exposed thing. I've seen another creative solution. It's not mine, but you might want to think about it, which is to put a couple of rip ties around these lugs here either side. Have the rip tie come up to about just above where the antenna is. So if you have the rip tie there, come up and then chop it off at the top, to make 2 kind of tall stands that will also help protect the antenna if it was to land on its head. You'll add a couple of grams, but you know, that might be a worthy thing to do, because these lobes can bend fairly easily. As I mentioned, I decided to put Betaflight on there. Really easy to set up Betaflight, and after we've done this close-up, I'll just take you through where I ended up with my PIDs and the settings that I punched in for that. What else comes in the kit? You get a couple of brushed motors, a clockwise and counterclockwise running. They're not like brushless motors, they have a direction because of the physical contact of those brushes and the way they're laid out in the motor. So it's nice they give you those. They also give you a prop removal tool, which is nice, and a lens cap as well. So there's, you know, a decent array of bits and bobs in there, and overall I've been really impressed with the flight. On Betaflight this has been great. It's been a real little performer. I've had loads of fun. I mean, these things don't have any inertia to them during manoeuvres, so you have to learn to pilot them accordingly. An example of that is when I've, you might spot it in the flight video that I put up previously, but you can be screaming along, do a backflip, and then you think you might suddenly be screaming along out of that backflip, and what you find is you almost stop dead. It just has no inertia to keep going, so you have to really pilot through the manoeuvres and approach doing FPV freestyle in a slightly different way to the way you would on your 200 sized and larger quads. But that said, it doesn't take long to adapt to it. It's an absolute ton of fun, and I'm really looking forward to doing some indoor racing with this. You soon forget that this is the size of what you're flying around when you actually have this thing in the goggles and you're screaming around outside. And again, the little brush motors, it makes virtually no noise once you're more than a few meters away from yourself. So there isn't a lot more to tell you about this. That is kind of it. As I said, the biggest thing that I would suggest is definitely get a set of these Walkera Ladybird props. Put that straight on the order if you're getting one of these. Do I recommend it? Absolutely, 100%. I think for the price, which is around the cost now of what you would pay for a standard Inductrix, you are getting the quad. You're getting everything, including the FPV system. You're getting 2 batteries. You just bind this to your Tyrannus or your FlySky, and you go out there and have a blast with it. And it's really hard to kind of compete with that. I think the stock weight, as it was, all up weight, was 54 grams. So I think now we're probably, I've added, what have I added here? Added a couple of rubber bands, these props instead of the stock ones, taken off the standoffs. I think we're probably going to be more or less the stock 54 that they're saying, with a battery, of course. We're at 40 without, 55, just over. I'm a gram over. So that's the, no, 54, it's settled. Let me put that in shot. There we go, 54 grams. So yeah, it's a great little machine. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I think you will too. Don't hesitate. If you're thinking about getting one of these, and you're wondering, is this worth it? Are you going to have a lot of fun, especially if you come from flying quads like I do regularly with those larger quads? I would say absolutely go for it. You'll have loads of fun. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's get on to the Betaflight setup. So on to flashing Betaflight on there, you do need to make sure that you select the SP Racing F3 Evo firmware for flashing onto this QX90. I've heard different reports about how people have got this to flash. For me, it turned out that all I needed to put was the manual baud rate on, and then I didn't need to put on the full chip arrays or reboot sequence, and then it flashed across fine. But it may need a little bit of experimenting with, and certainly checking that you have the right drivers installed to do so. If we connect to that, and go across to the configuration page, the main one is to make sure here that you select brushed as your motor type, which is nice. There's no messing around. That's now straight as a drop down in Betaflight 3. I ended up with 1015 as my minimum throttle. You don't need to do any kind of motor calibration on this. But if you're running in air mode as I do, and you want to find that nice min throttle speed for the props to spin at, 1015 was around the right place for me, where those motors were running stable at a low RPM. You probably find anything above that, the thing starts to take off. So that's where I was. Maybe use that as a starting point and go from there. In terms of the ports, I used UART2 for the serial RX, because this is the FR Sky one. RX serial selected, and S-Bus. I left everything, there's no buzzer on here, so you know, yeah, I just left these ticked because they run by default, doesn't really matter. And then I set it to 8 kilohertz, 1 kilohertz. I left the accelerometer on, which gives me a CP load of around 16 to 17%, which is absolutely fine, perfectly acceptable. And that gives me angle mode if I want it, even though I really only fly in rate mode. Across to the PID tuning. Now, these are a little bit wacky. I've kind of found two ways to get some good results out of it. Now, the proportionals on pitch and roll, because it's an X, are going to be the same because it's an X layout as opposed to an H shape, where you'd see a disparity between the roll and the pitch, usually with the pitch being higher. But yeah, these figures are pretty high. I was quite shocked with that. So I ended up with 80 and 80 on proportional for pitch and roll, integral of 45-45, and derivative of 20 and 20. And the yaw I had 70 and 45. Now I also had the same kind of flight results if I go across to profile 1 here. And that was 60-60, and then the derivatives of 60-60, which sound crazy high. But the temps were fine, the flights were fine. You just don't have the same kind of problems that you would have if you were to do this with brushless motors. So what I'd say is don't be afraid to push the figures around and try and get what you want. It won't have anywhere near the same kind of effect as it would have on brushless motors. They do come down a little bit warm, but then brush motors do come down warm. There's brushes in there and there's physical contact. It's not like the like brushless motors work. So all brushed motors come down a little warm. But what I can say is the flight times have been great, the power's good, and it all seems very acceptable to me. Your receiver, just set the configuration as you would normally. That is the channel map that we used for that. And then modes, I have ARM, I have air mode, angle mode, and that is it. As I said, nothing really to do in the motors tab and nothing to do in the CLI tab, so the only real thing to do are those few little tips that I mentioned. And this is where I ended up with my rates, and you know, I like it quite snappy. I don't want it hanging around during flips and rolls because there isn't loads of recovery power. So that felt good to me, but you know, if you've seen from my video the speed at which it rotates and that works for you, look, here are the ones, here's the numbers I ended up with. So again, use that as perhaps a ballpark for you if that's the way you fly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, guys, and I will see you all in the next one.